To get started with the Displacement SenSpot sensor installation, start by setting aside some of the essential components and parts that you will need that will assist you. This includes, but is not limited to, several quarter-inch, 2¼ inch stainless steel wedge anchor bolts, stainless steel hex nuts, 1/4 inch, and also some 1/4 inch stainless steel flat washers. You will also need a power drill that has both the rotary and hammer function, which is indicated on the device here. 1/4 inch masonry bit for concrete, a standard hammer, and a marker for marking the instrument. Start by positioning the included displacement sensor in the approximate location in which you want to monitor the crack or for any expansion, and take a marker pen to roughly mark that location, making sure to have the displacement sensor at approximately the distension that it will be after installation. Repeat this procedure for the other end of the displacement sensor, and then set the sensor aside. Take your hammer drill with the rotary function and make sure that you have set it to both the hammer and rotary function. Then start drilling at the marked locations that you've placed for the displacement sensor in the previous steps. You want to be sure to drill to enough that your chosen wedge anchor bolt is just beneath the concrete surface or just before the threading begins. This is usually between 1 and 2 inches. And then you should have enough to perfectly engage that wedge. Too little and you won't engage the wedge, and too much and you run the risk of having too little threads left for the following steps. Clear away any of the dust or debris created after drilling to produce a nice and clean work surface. Take your 2 wedge anchor bolts and with the wedge side first, insert into the drilled holes, and then take your hammer and tap just enough so that the threadings, where the threadings begin, are just under the wall's surface. And do the same for the second. Be sure that you have enough threading to allow for the next set of hardware to be attached. Using a set of 3/4 inch stainless steel hex nuts and 1 flat washer, you'll also need a 7/16 wrench. A socket is preferred. Place the flat washer first over the wedge anchor and start threading the first hex nut. We will be using the hex nuts as spacers to elevate the sensor above the wall surface to make it free for any expansion or contractions. Tighten the first nut until it's firm and allowing the wedge to engage. Add a second hex nut and tighten to fully engage with the first. Add a third one to increase the space still, and tighten to fully engage. Repeat the same steps on the next wedge anchor bolt. It's important that you tighten to fully engage the wedge anchor, lest it will run the risk of coming loose. And you want to be sure that you have a sufficient number of threads remaining to allow for both the spacing of the bullseye on these displacement sensors and for the last tightening nut above it. Here is approximately how much threading you'd like to have remaining after the previous step. Take your displacement sensor from before and feed the 2 eyelets or bullseye through each of the drilled and mounted wedge anchors. Now taking 2 more stainless steel quarter-inch hex nuts, start threading them and tightening with the same 7/16 socket wrench until very firm. Repeat on the second. Take your displacement SenSpot sensor with the attached cable, and with the free cable end, align it with the connector on the displacement sensor and start threading. Be sure to thread fully to fully engage the connector. Now the SenSpot is attached and should start transmitting valid readings for the displacement sensor. Taking the supplied waterproofing grease, shown here, and a tongue depressor or your finger, apply a generous amount of the grease at the base of the sensor where the internal piston meets the outer edge of the external cylinder. So just apply a bunch of grease here, and then using your finger, you can make sure that that is a very solid seal around the entire circumference of that internal piston. One simple way to attach the SenSpot node is to take some zip ties and some flush cutters and use the VHB end backing of the SenSpot node to attach it directly to the SenSpot attached displacement sensor. So remove the VHB backing, adhere to the displacement sensor, pressing firmly, then take one zip tie and feed it around and under the displacement sensor, over the node, and tighten to secure. As a final step, it's recommended that you mark the displacement node or any SenSpot node in a descriptive way so that the device is recognizable later. So here we're noting that the device ID is 5006, the last four digits, and then we give a useful name that is descriptive of that device's location. And then it's best to take a photo of both the node and the marked location for further documentation.